We go to Zimbabwe now, where opposition leader Nelson Chamisa has announced a return to active politics 2 years after stepping away from the Citizens Coalition for Change. He's launched what he calls Agenda 2026, a citizens' movement aimed at addressing what he describes as a deep governance crisis marked by disputed elections, corruption, and state capture. But questions remain about its impact, its structure, and whether it can reshape Zimbabwe's political landscape. For analysis, we're joined now by Zimbabwean political analyst Tendai Mbofana. Tendai, good morning and thank you for making time to talk to us.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Good morning, and good morning to all your listeners and viewers.
Our pleasure. So, Chamisa deciding to return to politics, what do you make of this move? He's now coming under Agenda 2026. He's not with a political party, he's with this citizens movement.
Yes, Asanda, that was a very interesting development. Actually, it was not surprising. We've been following Nelson Chamisa for the past 2 years, where he was supposed to be on some sort of a heist or sabbatical, but he was signaling that anytime he was going to come back. So it really didn't take us by surprise as Zimbabweans. What we were just wondering was, when was he going to come back and in what form was he going to come back? But as you have already alluded to, he came back under this theme of Agenda 2026 and a movement rather than a political party. And he made a very interesting comment that in the 2 years that he's not been on the dance floor, so as to speak, so that's how we described it, no one else has been able to come onto that dance floor and dance, so he's decided to come back and dance himself. So we were to see what type of dance has he brought onto the table. Has he come to tango? Has he come to dance alone? Has he come to disco? We don't know. That's what we are waiting for. You know, it's all good, fair and good to talk about Agenda 2026 and a people's movement rather than a political party. But the taste, is in eating. What is it in this movement that will be different from a political party? I remember there was a mention of what happened during the liberation struggle, that there were movements rather than political parties, but there were political parties. A movement is not necessarily an absence of a political party. We can talk about the nationalist movements, liberation movements, but there was ZANU, there was ZAPU. Those were political parties with structures, with constitutions, with executives. So we want to see what type of movement that is planning to bring about, because already there are indications that there will not be any structures. The same problem that we witnessed when the CCC, or the Citizens Coalition for Change, was hijacked and dismantled, and Chamisa himself decided to then take a sabbatical. There is nothing that cannot be hijacked. But what the main weakness of the CCC was that it didn't have any known structures. They had what they called strategic ambiguity, and no constitution. But the problem with strategic ambiguity is that if it's within the movement itself or the party itself, where even members of that movement do not even know what their roles are, don't even know where this train is taking them to, it becomes weak. You cannot pull in the same direction. United we stand, divided we fall. But in a movement or in an organization that doesn't have a structures, doesn't have a constitution, doesn't even have something that is laid down and clearly clarified, and say, this is what we aim to do, this is who we are, this is how we are going to operate. You are effectively dividing your own movement, and you are going to fall. So it wasn't surprising what happened 2 years ago when this character, Chabangu, came on board and hijacked the whole thing. So there is a real danger of repeating the same mistakes. So the question is, has Nelson Chamisa learned anything from the mistakes of 2 years ago? What is different about this movement that is different from what happened 2 years ago? Can it not be sabotaged? Can it not be infiltrated and hijacked? What measures is he coming with that will prevent that from happening? Can we actually say, what is this movement that is not a political party? How is it going to mobilize on the grassroots? Will people just volunteer and say, I'm part of this movement, so I'm going to mobilize people on the grassroots? Or they have to be structured where the vision of this movement is clearly defined. I know that when he introduced this agenda 2026, he said, oh, these decisions about what we want in a new Zimbabwe, how we should wage this struggle should be determined at the grassroots level by the people. But it's all good, very good to say that the people should make decisions. But who's going to, to get those visions?
Realistically, though, in Zimbabwe's political party, Tendai, can this type of a model work? As you mentioned, it is not a political party. He's insisting that it's a movement, a citizens' movement. And also, what does that signal then in terms of a shift from politics being seen as having influence or power when it comes to governance?
To be honest, I don't think it will work. Why I say so, it's still too vague to say, how will a movement mobilize against a repressive system like that we have under ZANU-PF? How is that movement? Because you need a coherent structure. You cannot just have a loose something, whatever it is, of people just saying we are part of this movement, but it doesn't have structures, it doesn't have a constitution, it doesn't have clearly laid out organizational structure. And you say we are going to use this fluid, liquid thing, air, effectively just a bunch of air, and say we are going to confront a repressive system like ZANU-PF. That, to me, unless there is something else that is going to come out as time goes on and say, to face a repressive system like ZANU-PF, you need something that is structured, something that is united, that is coherent, that is forceful. I gave an example of the liberation movement in the 1960s and 1970s against colonialism. It wasn't just a movement. These were political parties that had structures, that had ideologies, that were driven by specific ideologies, that were led by specific people, that ended up even forming liberation armies, military wings, ZIPRA, Zandla, that fought the colonial regime. So what is it that this now new Agenda 2026 is bringing onto the table that will effectively confront a repressive system that is no different from the colonial system that we fought against in the 1970s and 1960s? What is it? The political party system that was there in the opposition, it didn't fail because it was a political party. Morgan Tsvangirai from the MDC, and then came the Triple C with Chamisa and so on, did not fail because they were political parties. They failed because, one, they were fighting against an oppressive system, and two, they failed to come up with systems that can confront, that are specifically designed to confront an oppressive system. You do not confront an oppressive, repressive, dictatorial system using, waiting for elections. Say we're going to participate in elections and hopefully this time we are going to win. It will not work. That's why we continually cry over the same thing repeatedly since 2000, 2002, 2008, 2013, 2018, 2023. We are still
we're going to have to leave it there, Tendai. Sorry to cut you there, but we're completely out of time and we really appreciate your insights on this topic.
Thank you so much, Asanda.
Thanks. That's Tendai Mbofana, who is Zimbabwean political analyst, giving us insights on Nelson Chamisa's return to, well, do we call it politics? Because he's calling it a civic or movement rather than a political party, this Agenda 2026 of his. I know you've got something to say. It's Zimbabwean linked story. So what are your thoughts?
So what's interesting is, and a lot of people may not remember, but former DA leader who split away, I forget his name now.
Musa Maiman
Yes,
went to the
he
one
did
party.
exactly the same thing.
One
He
South
started
Africa.
with a movement which eventually became a political party after they had done the canvassing of conversations and moving across the nation. So don't be surprised if he isn't following that model where you start with conversations under a movement, and then once you've had the conversations with the people, what do they want, then it becomes a political party. So it's not strange. I suspect that that's what's happening.
Okay, we'll see.